Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. All right, I am super excited today. I've been waiting very impatiently for Cyberflesh to arrive since the day I ordered it a few weeks ago, or maybe about a month ago now. Cyberflesh is a boxed game from HoloPress and or from holopress.net. HoloPress, the publishers of things like Vermis. Now, in today's video, we will be taking a look at everything you get in the box. I've already done an unboxing, but I didn't want to film the unboxing, or I filmed it, but it wasn't very exciting. So I decided to get everything out. We'll take a look at everything you get. I'll talk a little bit about the game. We'll do some setup, and then we'll do some gameplay examples, because I know people are pretty interested in seeing gameplay of this. As of right now, as of just maybe a day or so ago, there was only one gameplay video, and it was in Italian. I'm not going to play a full game, but you will get a very good sense of how this game is played. I think it's best, however, to not think of Cyberflesh as just a game. That really wasn't even the way I approached it when I ordered it, and that's made even more apparent now. What Cyberflesh is 50% game, 50% way to engage with, to interact with an art project. Cyberflesh is a game for people who liked Vermis. And Vermis is a book that from Plastaboo and HoloPress. We've taken a detailed review of this, but Vermis is a source book for a game that doesn't exist. Cyberflesh says, what if we made a source book and also made a game? So Vermis is kind of, or Cyberflesh is kind of like Vermis for people who thought Vermis should or wanted it to also be a game. And I think if you approach it in that way, you will be more happy. It is an expensive product, but I think you're buying this kind of interactive art book as well as a game. And for the game is really fun. I think the game is really fun. It's not going to it's not a ground-breaking experience, though. I put the game right up there with something like Bag of Dungeon, or Seven Moons, or Glory 2nd Edition in its simplicity. But it has a ton of really, really cool things to interact with. The theme is awesome. And yeah, it's kind of a rad thing. And that's kind of why I originally bought it. So let's see here, Cyberflesh. Neither maps nor names exist for this place. They tried to revive technology but failed. Their harmony today is the measure of that failure. Everything dies and dies anew in a loop infected by the germ of iteration. Creatures are born whose only purpose is to crush, tear, mangle. Others are born, their sole purpose being to be crushed, torn, or mangled endlessly again and again with neither end nor beginning. So Cyberflesh is a game. It's a dungeon crawl game for 1 to 3 players. You can have a 4th player, but that 4th player just kind of controls the game. They control the AI, they control the monsters, and they will read from the event book, kind of like a game master. So the box is really nice, has all of this kind of weird necrotic flesh on the inside here, and attached to the lid of the box is your first art book. And this is the bestiary. And this details all of the flesh lords, or the cyber lords, all of the bosses, and all of the various enemies that you will be fighting in a game of Cyberflesh. And so this would be your first kind of indication that this is something more akin to Vermis than a standard board game. And so here we have all of our beasts, all of our monsters. We have their stats, their power levels, and like all of their different stats down here. And we have a little bit of information for each of the enemies. This is blood and open wounds are its joy. He has a sphincter reactors for aerial maneuvering. It's a bladder allowing it to float. A stupid object floating in the air and knocking heads off. That's its purpose. Razor sharp blades swirling clumsily in the void. And then we have our ochre and our nub, our zeal and our gome, our umut and our fak, and the bobal and the agar, the Nawab and the Rogue, and so on. And so here is your just a really nice book of cool art. and you can kind of piece together some of the lore and some of the things going on in this world. And then that is actually attached to the box. So the box becomes a kind of interactive art book. And then inside the rest of the box, you will have all of the place to store your components for the game. Your second major piece of art, your second major art book here is the events book. The events book is basically a deck of 30 random events that you will encounter as you are playing a game of Cyberflesh. Each one of these will correspond to a tile. When you flip that tile over, you will open up the events book and read what happens to your characters. We also get a little bit of story here. Cyberflesh, before the game. Who are you? Bioslaves. The bioslave is born to serve. He is not allowed to know who he serves. His only activity is working in the tunnels, in the plants, in the undying factories. He does not sleep and does not eat, as the computation of pain has purged its genome from these needs. Who is Cyberflesh? He is the annihilator, the ravager, the abhorrent. He is an ancient lord orchestrator who, by hint of suffering, sanctions, and punishments for his obscene and destructive behavior, has developed a brutal need for brutality and carnage, and thus earned the title of ultimate dysfunctional. Cyberflesh is primal fury, the tracked beast, the unending bloodshed. He does not serve the perpetuation, but unknowingly incarnates it, since in the name of oppression and destruction, he brings order where chaos thrives and chaos where order reigns. Sounds like a nice fella there. And finally, what is the stomach prison? The stomach prison is the labyrinth. The stomach prison is the dungeon that we are crawling through. Even narcosis fails to penetrate the depths of this prison. No one knows how far it extends. No one knows how many creatures dwell there, silently melting away. But then each page, each spread is a really cool work of art, a little bit of story, and a mechanic. And some of the encounters are complex. They will have multiple kind of subtables that you will roll on. Some of them, you just bad things happen. Some of them good things happen. You can meet merchants and bosses and all kinds of things. So this is basically a big deck of 30 random encounters that you will be working through on each one of your games. And a game of Cyberflesh only probably lasts about an hour and a half or so. And it's a one and done game. There's no campaign or anything. The next thing you'll get is your rules. And this is a fold out rules pamphlet. So Cyberflesh introduction to the game. You are inside a living maze known as the Stomach Prison. Cyberflesh, an unpredictable, aberrant fusion of flesh and machine, breaks the barriers, binding you, accidentally kickstarting your escape to freedom. Ringing the two sirens will require great risk and cost, but eradicating the two lords is the only way to reach him. You are crazy and desperate enough to try and cross it towards the coveted and utopic freedom. So you'll have your game system. The game system uses a system called Entropy 8. I had never heard of that system until today, or until I got this game. But basically, you have D8s. The whole game is D8s. This game comes with 5 really cool D8s. And every time you roll a D8, you add a total to it. You add a modifier or subtract a modifier, and you're trying to hit an 8 or greater to do the thing that you need to do. Very simple system. Sometimes you will also roll a D4 or a D2. So the D8s work very well. And then we go into the rules about how to set up your first game, your player characters, the biome, so all of the different tiles that will create the maps while you are playing. And you also have this fold-out pamphlet here that shows you how to set up each of the maps. And you roll a D8 to determine which map you will be playing on. The maps will be made from these different tiles here. So we have 2 different stacks of tiles. We have our tiles with our blips on them, our little alien, our movement blips. And these are what correspond to the events in the event book. So if you uncover tile 15, you will turn to page 15 in the event book, and 13, and so on. These are randomized. You never know which events you are going to have during a game. There will always be between 6 and 10 random events in a game, so you won't see everything in a single game. This smaller stack of tiles you will always use in every single game. And the book or the pamphlet here It details each one. You have your start tile, which you will read event 0 from the event book. You have 6 combat tiles. Whenever you uncover a combat tile, which is a skull here, then you will go into a combat phase and you will have to fight a number of different Cyberflesh monsters. When you uncover one of the 2 treasure chests like these, then you get to draw some loot from the loot deck. And the loot in this game is really cool. I really like it a lot. There is also this DNA tile here, and this is a mutation tile. When you draw that tile, you will become mutated, and there's a large deck of different mutations that you can suffer from. Some of them are beneficial, some of them are harmful. We have this Cure 25 tile, and this is a way to help heal your character during your adventure. There are also opportunities to meet merchants in the dungeon, and when you flip over 26 or 27, which is a merchant, then you turn to that merchant event in the events book. And then there are also 2 sirens. These are alarms. These are things that the players have to trigger, and you have to trigger each one of those, and as you do so, it makes the game harder. It makes the game, the dungeon, more deadly. And you have to do that in order to activate the exit and escape. And that is how you win the game. In doing so, you will also need to face off against one of the bosses. And we have 2 different bosses here. We have the Necrosis Warlord and the Eyeless Commander. And the more powerful enemies, they are scaled a little bit to how many people are playing. So it is possible to play this solo as also a lone wolf style character. The rest of the rules pamphlet goes through how to set up your character. So you have your character in the middle, and then you have slots around the character for your cards to place your weapons, a helmet, a suit, and then 4 mutations. It goes through your various stats. We'll take a look at the stats here. Actually, here's a player card here. So there are 3 characters. We have MO1, MO2, and MO3. Each one of them will have an initiative. And so in combat or in other things that timing matters, you go from highest to lowest. So MO3 is the slowest and MO2 is the fastest. We have a strength value, a health value, an intelligence value, and an accuracy. Those will get added to D8s. And again, you're trying to hit a D8 to do whatever you need to do to hit, to break down a door or something like that. And then each of the characters also starts with some certain gear, either a weapon, maybe some armor or some equipment. And we'll take a look at the gear in just a minute. Actually, let's go ahead and let's finish up looking at the book here. So we have our equipment section, then how to explore the biomes, going through a combat phase and combat. And that is basically it. It's a pretty simple game. I think the rules are pretty clear. I didn't really have any issue learning the game. Let's take a look at the decks of cards now. So we have a few major decks of cards. We have our loot deck here. We have our Lord deck, our bosses. These are kind of our mini bosses here. We have the Cyberflesh boss and the Cyberflesh NPC and a small event deck. We'll take a look at that in more detail. And then we also have our mutations deck, and we have our enemy deck. Let's go ahead and take a look at the loot deck first, because the loot deck is really nice and it has a lot of cards here. And I believe every single one is different. And so you have all kinds of cool art. So we have our weapons here, the repugnant sword. That shows you where it can be equipped on your character. That shows you how many hands it takes. So you have one-handed or two-handed weapons. That's how much damage it does. That's how many dice you get to roll when you attack, and each die is its own attack. So if you have multiple weapons with multiple dice, you can do multiple attacks on different enemies. And then a lot of the weapons have really cool abilities. So it's not just a simple +1 or +2 sword. This one here says equipped characters gain 1 necrotic damage. So necrotic damage is really nasty damage, because I can take 22 hits before my character dies. But if I ever take 8 points of necrotic damage, then I immediately drop to 0 hit points and that character dies. So it's kind of like super damage. But when you equip this sword, you gain 1 necrotic damage. And if that character has 4 necrotic or more, it deals 1 extra damage. So it's kind of a press your luck thing. You can go in with higher necrotic damage, but you can do more damage. And then this value here, that is the value that you need to pay in health to gain this from a merchant. So health is also your blood, is also a currency. I think that is super, super cool. Very thematic and kind of gross. Here we have a weapon called the Remains, a senseless mauler, the overwhelming great axe. Here is the repugnant shell. So that is a suit that you can wear. There is the repugnant hard shell. That is a helmet. The bloodbath dagger, the obsessive gun, the bloodbath head shell, the rabid gun, the dark cult helmet, the smart bomber. We also have these items here that you can have, and these are one-use items. So this is the obliterator. There's the dermoid suit, the bioguardian shell, the mirror sword, the razor claw, the leveler, the great launcher, ghostly fumes, the repugnant machine gun, the guts gun, faceless war shell, the vital system, a vivicator, the big blag, the blind grinder, the ibby, the repugnant fury. So yeah, all kinds of super, super cool weapons. Very Doom-like, very Quake-like. Let's take a look at the mutations as well, because the mutations are also loot. And the loot you can choose to replace. If you have one gun or one sword and you get another one, you can choose to, if you want to replace it or not. The mutations are always rotating out. You don't have a say. When you draw a new mutation, you have to slot it in the slot where the mutation tells you to put it. And so some of these are good and some of them are bad. We have things like Cerebral Sting. So this would take over your helmet slot. And this says discard any card, if any, so any helmet. Equipped character gets +1 to each stat score. Hey, that's pretty good. This can go into any of the 4 corners, and that's called the Swollen Fibers. Equipped character gains +2 strength. Here we have a Filthy Foot. That goes over here. Each character gets a -1 to their speed, to their initiative value. We have the Spike Blade on the right-hand side. When equipped, discard a one-handed weapon or two-handed weapon card in that slot, if any. If Spike Blade left is also equipped, add 1 attack die. So you get to attack with your new Spike Blade arms. So yeah, the mutations are fun. This is a super cool element. I always like games with mutations. Let's see. Let's take a look at the enemy deck as well. So the enemy deck, these will all correspond to the pages in that bestiary that we took a look at the beginning of the video. And the enemies will have basic stats. They will have a number of damage that they do, a number of attack dice that they use, who they attack. So they will always attack the character with the lowest stat value that they target. So the Gum will always attack the slowest character. The Nawab will always attack the character with the lowest intelligence. The Sluta will always attack the character with the lowest accuracy. And they will also have their own initiative value, as well as their health value and their accuracy. And quite a few of the enemies also have unique special abilities. So for instance, he ignores critical hits. And when you kill him, you get to draw 1 loot card. The Keel here, at the end of each turn's combat phase, draw an enemy card from the graveyard deck. So this guy, he resurrects dead creatures and they come back to life. So you want to try to focus on this guy first before killing them, before killing any of the other creatures in the battle line. And there are quite a few little combinations like that. And so while the game is rather simple, the complexity kind of snowballs a little bit as you start combining these different elements. And so it ends up becoming pretty interesting. We also have a deck of our sub-bosses. So when you come across one of those sirens, when you trigger one of those alarms, you draw one of these special bosses and you have to encounter it. So you might have the Lord Nitrax or Lord Smirnoth, Lord Glorg, Lord Brumst, Lord Grained, Lord Carcadron, or Lord Somnia. And these guys are pretty nasty. And man, just look at that art. God, it's so good. It's so, so good. We'll have to take a look at the art credits. I know Plastaboo did do at least one piece of art here. And then finally, the last deck of cards we have is this event deck. And the Cyberflesh boss is always on top of this event deck. When you backtrack through the dungeon, you roll a d8. And if you roll a 1, the Cyberflesh boss bursts through the Cyberfleshy wall and you have to fight it. And it is very deadly. It always hits because it has an accuracy of 8. And so it'll always hit you. It attacks all of the characters in your party for 8 damage. and you have to destroy it. If you destroy it, or you can also escape from it because it's very hard to kill. But if you destroy it, you flip it over, I should say, and it becomes an NPC that will actually help your party escape. And then when it dies again, then it flips back over to its boss side. So very, very cool. And then this event deck, this will correspond to different things that might trigger from the event book. And these are special items, special weapons, and special NPCs that your characters can find to help you out through your adventure. So we also get a few tokens here to keep track of your health, some tokens here to keep track of the alert level, and these will help determine how many enemies you fight while you are in combat. And then we also get some of our necrotic damage tokens. So let's go ahead and let me move some of this stuff out of the way, and we will play some sample turns here of Cyberflesh so you can kind of see how the game goes. So the first thing we'll do is we will take our character cards here. Let's shuffle those up, and we'll just play lone wolf mode. I'll draw one character here. Okay, so we are playing as MO2. So MO2 starts the game with the obsessive gun and the ghostly fumes. Very fast with a 5 initiative. Not very strong, a 2 strength, 18 health, 4 intelligence, and an accuracy of 2. So let me go ahead and find those. The obsessive gun and the ghostly fumes. Ghostly fumes there. And the obsessive gun. Obsessive gun, all right. Give those a little shuffle there. Okay, so our obsessive gun, it is a one-handed weapon. It can be equipped in our left hand or our right hand. Roll an extra attack die when attacking if you have the rabid gun in your equipment as well. Okay, so we want to try to find a rabid gun. That's a good pairing. I can attack for 2d8, and I do 1 damage. And then I also have a ghostly fumes, which is it's an item that I can use when revealing a combat tile. Characters may skip the ensuing combat phase. This ability cannot be used when facing an enemy boss. So when I reveal one of those combat tiles, if I want, I can toss out this smoke grenade and avoid the combat. So that is my character here. So we'll equip the obsessive gun in that slot there. Items. Usable items do not get slotted, and you can have as many of these as you want. Okay, now let's roll up to see what maze we're going to be going through. 5. Okay, so we'll check our pamphlet here, and we will go to 5, and this is how we're going to set up. So we have these different motion blip trackers. Those will be set out there, and then these will all be the regular tiles, and we will start there and we will exit there. So I'm going to go ahead and build this deck now, or build this map now. So we have our start tile and we have our exit tile. We will turn these over and give these a shuffle. Okay, and then we will also shuffle up our random events. These were already basically shuffled here. And how many random events are we going to have? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so there is our maze all set up. This does get a little fiddly, but it sets up pretty quickly. Doesn't need to be perfectly straight. All right, and then we also have our combat tiles. And these are just tiles where we place loot or enemies while we are fighting. And we can fight up to 5 enemies at a time. So we'll just place those up here. Each one of those, when we have a combat encounter, we actually roll a d8. Actually, let's put those a little bit down here so they can be on camera a little bit more. And just kind of have to get creative with how things are set up to make sure everything sits on the camera there. When you come across one of those combat tiles, you roll a d8 for each empty slot. And on an 8 or higher, also depending on adding the alert level, you will draw an enemy and add it to that combat slot. I guess that doesn't really work because sometimes they do need to be adjacent to each other. We'll just have to work. We'll figure it out. I just want to make sure I can get everything on screen. We do start with 2 alerts. So a game starts with at alert level 2 plus 2 for every character more than 1. But we're just playing with 1 character. So we are at alert level 2. Put my events book over here. Here's my character. And let's see, we have our enemy deck here. So when we draw enemies, we have our mini boss deck here for when we come across one of the sirens. We have our loot deck here, and the graveyard will be right here. And then we'll place our mutations over here. And we will take our character. And here's our little party character. So the characters will all move together. So this is one of those games where the characters all move together. So I kind of view this more as a solo game. And then we'll also take our events deck here. Actually, let's take our events deck here and put that right there. All right, so we are at tile number 0. We always start at 0. We can take a look at the events book to read some theme here for 0. Escape the stomach prison. Start. Everything starts with a great explosion. A bleeding and purging gap breaks open into the prison's wall. Some prisoners rush through the gap. Cyberflesh, a dismembered demigod, crushes them with flying fists. Laughing, the foul air of the tunnel carries the horrible stench of necrosis. The mind already begins getting sick. The body starts melting. Fury and folly get hold of the bodies, sensing the escape route through the darkness. Running is the first and only instinct. Cyberflesh is still roaming around the lower levels, thirsty for who knows what. It doesn't matter, it's time. Each character starts the game with the equipment, consumables, weapons, and suit listed on their card. Take the corresponding cards from the loot deck, we did that, and then shuffle it back. A Cyberflesh game always starts with 2 alerts, with an alert of 2, plus an additional 2 for each player beyond the first. Okay, so we have our alert level there. And Cyberflesh has crashed through the wall. Cyberflesh is that boss that will be chasing us. And now we can move. So we only really have one choice to move. Each of the different maps does have some cool movement. And you do have to think a little bit about how you're going to be exploring. Using your health kind of becomes a resource. And you might want to push your luck a little bit and explore some of those events to maybe have some cool things happen. But you might also end up taking too much damage. But our first thing is going to be right here, and we'll flip that over. That is going to be event 15, and we'll move to 15. And let's go to 15 here and read 15. The Body Breeder. He sells bodies mostly belonging to dysfunctional, strangely survived among the ravines of the tunnels. He controls them with chains, holding them grouped. He feeds with a spray of synthetic broth. He despises such life forms the same way he despises himself. The sphere pretends nothing happens. Thanks to his past as an ancestral orchestrator, he is allowed this trade in exchange for complete seclusion. He never thinks, but when he does, he thinks of Cyberflesh and all the raids they did together. He's like reminiscing about his time with Cyberflesh. That's hilarious. And so he calls to him, "Where is he? Where is that reject? Where is that pile of shit? Should he be here, I would throw his herd of beasts in the air and follow him to the bottom. Bring him to me. I want Cyberflesh." If the players have the Cyberflesh NPC, the player with the highest current health gets the NPC card, the Breeder. Take the card, the Breeder, from the event deck. Players can interact with the Body Breeder anytime they come back to the specific event tile. Interesting. That's cool. So if at some point we meet Cyberflesh, the boss, and we defeat him, and he becomes our NPC, we can return to tile 15 and trade this NPC for the Breeder. That is super cool. I really like that. There are quite a few events where you can return to interact with later. And to keep track of that, I will usually put one of these extra necrotic tokens on there just to show that I have not yet interacted with that spot. Okay, so now we only have one choice, so we can move forward here. And we come across the Merchant. All right, the Merchant very early in the game. That will be number 27. There are 2 different merchants that you can run across in the game. So let's see, Merchant 27. This is the Grim Merchant. Living flesh is traded for a quick scalpel work. The creature offering itself for such a job is the most repugnant you can ever meet in the tunnels, but its knowledge of mutations is unmatched. It is said it was an orchestrator, blasphemous and perverse, who went in self-exile in the lower level to breathe first-hand form. It's to a lower level to breathe firsthand from its source, the dark balm of necrosis. Okay, players roll a 1d4 anytime they want, suffering that amount of damage scored on the die to draw and obtain a mutation. Players can interact with the Grim Merchant anytime they come back to this specific event. If and as long as Cyberflesh is a player's NPC, the later cannot interact with this event tile. Okay. So if you have Cyberflesh NPC, you cannot interact with the Grim Merchant. Right now, I can chance it to take D4 damage for a mutation. And I think I will. I think I'm going to do that. So let's see how much damage I take. 1. Perfect. All right. So I take 1 point of damage, and I will draw my mutation. And I have the Thorny Tentacle. Apply Drain to any attacks made with the Thorny Tentacle. Drain allows me to heal the damage that I do, so that's super cool. It attacks for 1, it does 1 point of damage, and I can put it in the lower left or the upper right. I think I will put it in the upper right just to keep it on camera better. Okay, so that was that. Now we'll move on to this next tile. And we have some combat. Okay, so here we go, combat. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different slots open. We will roll a d8 for each slot. We will add 2 to the d8, and any that hits 8 or higher, we will have an enemy. Okay, 3, 2, 6, 1, and 2. So adding 2 to the 6 gives us an 8, so we will have 1 enemy in the first slot over here. So let's see who we are facing. The Umat. So this has Insight 1. This is a power where it does matter how you have these set up, because in Sight 1, all adjacent enemies do an additional point of damage. So there are no other adjacent enemies. He will do 3 points of damage. It attacks with a die of 1. It will target the character, the player with the lowest initiative, but we're just playing with 1, so it always targets me. It has an initiative of 3, 2 damage, and an accuracy of 2. So we'll place the Umat in the first slot there. I have an initiative of 5, so I go first, and I have an accuracy of 2. My gun has 2 dice that I can attack. I will apply both attacks to the Umat there, and adding a 2, I do not get an 8, so I do no damage. However, I also have my Thorny Tentacle, and my Thorny Tentacle is 1 d8, and I can add 2 to this, and a 3. No, so I do no damage. Okay, so now the Umat attacks me. It has 1 die. It has an accuracy of 2 and nothing. Okay, let's repeat that process again. There we go, an 8 and a 7. An 8 is a critical, so I do 1 additional damage. So that's 1 plus 1 is 2 damage. And I also do a damage for the 7, so that's enough damage to kill the Umat. I don't get any loot for it or anything, so that just goes to the graveyard. And so that was that there. Now you can only move orthogonally, and so we're getting ready to where we have a little branching path here. So let's move on to this event here. We'll do one more event. I don't want to give away too many of the events, but 13. Okay, so let's turn to event 13 here. And here we have the sidereal margin. An accidental gash in the structure gives rise to the margin here. Through it, one can see what's called the sky, standing above all the levels of the sphere. It is a cause for shivering because it seems that even for the uppers, there is something that is above us, as certainly there is for the lowers. With great ease, one finds oneself stuck in that hole, longing to see the shaggy red clouds, the hysterical blue lightnings, the perpetuation itself. None of this can be seen. Instead, it is I, the poet, the infested, the traveler, the chaos of symbols and loots, who appears out of the impenetrable fog. I am the faraway shadow giving peace to the heartbroken. To those who listen to me, I grant rest. Roll 1d8 and read the poem. Okay, somebody's going to be reading me a poem. A 7. Okay, so let's read this poem here. Bioslaves. When the mind does not have the defect of memory, when the body comes back thousands of times, you are never dead. You are never alive. Wow, okay. So maybe better than some Vorgon poetry, but how cool is that? Some creature recites your poetry to you while you are trying to escape the stomach maze hell. But so yeah, that's kind of that's kind of Cyberflesh. You pick a direction you go, and then you do what the tile says, having combat, really trying to get some of this loot because the loot is super cool. The enemies get stronger as you go because the alert level will go up, so you will have more enemies to deal with. As you find those sirens, you will interact with the sirens in the event book. That will raise the danger level, and then you will have to fight one of the bosses. And then at the end of the game, you will have to fight one of the two main bosses before you can escape from the exit. And you also have to find both of those sirens to ignite and to interact with. But I think this game is cool. I think as a piece of art, as an art book, as a way to engage with, to interact with neat art, I really do like it. I think the bestiary in the box is cool. I'm not a huge fan of it being attached to the book, to the box. I know it's something a little unique, something a little different, but I would like to just kind of take this out sometimes and just look at it without having to open up this giant box. But it's cool. It's cool. I think my only real complaint about the quality of the product is the event book. I wish it was better quality. It's really thin. The pages are really kind of thin magazine pages. I would have loved to have seen the events book in a nicer hardback stitched version. I like this so much that I would actually buy a really high quality events book to put in my box because I feel like I have to treat this with kind of kids gloves on because I'm afraid that it's going to get just a little damaged because it's so thin. And this is kind of like one of the main ways that you do interact with the game. But building out your character with mutations and different loot, I like how this gets set up. I like how there are different maps, and the different maps do feel different because there is backtracking in the game. And there's a little bit of press your luck in how you are exploring, dealing with the enemies. The combat is fast, but it's also kind of interesting. The story is cool and weird and twisted. And if you're into that kind of stuff, I think you will like it. But overall, I'm very, very happy with Cyberflesh as a game. I think it's fun, it's simple, it's straightforward, but it's engaging. And as a art book, as an art collection, as a collection of cool art and lore and writing, I also think it's pretty dang good. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video on Cyberflesh. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.